should have listened to them. Every one of them. But when you're young, and you've got that itch to prove something, you don't hear what you don't want to hear. I thought I was above the stories, above the warnings. I thought the old folks in town were just tired, just scared of change, of someone like me, someone who didn't grow up in these woods. The Appalachian Mountains are quiet. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence you find in the city, where everything's just waiting to burst into noise. No. This silence is deeper. It presses in on you, making your own breath sound too loud, too urgent, like it might disturb something out there. Something that shouldn't be disturbed. I came up here for a weekend, a solo hiking trip, to clear my head and recharge. I hadn't planned on staying the night, but one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I'd lost track of time. I was in deeper than I realized, miles from the nearest cabin or trailhead. By the time I thought about turning back, the sun had already dipped behind the ridge, and the trees took on that thick, dark green that made it feel like the forest itself was closing in on me. I stopped in a clearing near a crumbling stone wall, the remnants of something old. It had to be at least a century old. Maybe older, some abandoned homestead. Maybe the stones were weathered, moss growing thick on their faces, almost as if the land was trying to reclaim them. It was too quiet there, though. The kind of quiet that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I dropped my pack on the ground and tried to convince myself I wasn't feeling anxious. It was just the wilderness, after all. People had lived out here for generations. They'd been fine. They'd survived the cold, the isolation, the storms, the stories. Just that. Stories. But that seps when I heard it. A soft sound, like footsteps crunching in the dried leaves. It wasn't loud enough to be anything solid, just the rustling of something moving through the underbrush. Still, it was there. In the space between my breaths, it had to be a person, right? But when I looked around, I saw no one. The trees were still. The rocks, the moss, the dirt, everything was still. I shook my head, trying to laugh it off. Just a deer or something, I muttered to myself. The wind picked up, swaying the branches, making the leaves rustle like whispers, but the footsteps kept coming. Closer this time. I froze. It was too deliberate now, too human. Someone was out there. Someone was following me. I grabbed my pack and slung it over my shoulder, my heart hammering in my chest. The forest felt like it was pressing in, closing around me, trapping me. Every step I took seemed to echo in the trees, too loud, too frantic. The footsteps never stopped. They were behind me, not too far off, but close enough that I could feel the weight of their presence, like the breath on the back of my neck. I dared a glance over my shoulder, but saw nothing. No figure, no shape in the dark. But I could hear it, the soft, steady crunch of steps. I stumbled forward, pushing through the underbrush, my breath coming fast and shallow. The air felt thick with moisture, the scent of earth and damp leaves filling my nose. The path ahead was winding and unfamiliar. I didn't know which way to go, but the footsteps were closer now, too close. I rounded a bend in the trail and spotted a cabin in the distance. It was old, maybe abandoned, but it was a building, a place to hide, to get out of the open. I sprinted toward it, the sound of the footsteps never faltering behind me. When I reached the cabin, I didn't hesitate. I threw open the door, the old wood creaking in protest, and slammed it shut behind me. I leaned against it, my chest heaving, trying to calm my breath. For a long moment, there was only silence. The footsteps stopped. I didn't dare move. The cabin smelled of rot and stale wood. The floorboards creaked beneath me, and I was aware of every little sound, every small shift of the wind outside. My eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls, and I looked around. The cabin wasn't set empty. On the far wall, there were markings carved into the wood, strange symbols. They were old, faded, but unmistakable. They looked like something I'd seen in the old stories, the ones the townsfolk used to whisper about when they thought no one was listening. signs of protection, warding. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I shouldn't have come here. The silence dragged on, thick and heavy, and then I heard it again. The soft, shuffling footsteps. This time, they weren't just behind me. They were inside the cabin, too. I spun toward the door, but there was nothing. The place was empty. The air still, yet I could feel it. The presence. Something was in here with me. My mind raced. Could someone have gotten in? Could I have missed them? No, it wasn't possible. Not without me noticing. The footsteps stopped again, and for a brief, maddening second, I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe the isolation was getting to me, but then came the sound of breathing. Slow, steady, deliberate. I wasn't Test alone. I backed away, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Any explanation. The door was still closed, locked, but there was no escape through it. The only window in the cabin was too small to fit through. And besides, there was nothing outside but the same dark, suffocating woods. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the corner and held it in front of me like a weapon, my hands trembling. I should have left when they told me to leave. I should have listened to the old man at the diner, the one who'd warned me about the wanderers in the woods, the ones who got lost and never came back, the ones who weren't quite human anymore. But it was too late for that now. The footsteps were getting closer again, slowly. My heart raced, sweat beaded on my forehead. I had to move. I couldn't stay here, but I couldn't stay in the woods either, not with whatever it was out there. I didn't know what to do. The door shuddered. A knock. Once, twice, a third time. Then the sound of something scraping against the door, slowly, deliberately, as if whatever was out there was trying to force its way in. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. My legs felt weak, my whole body shaking. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the footsteps stopped. The door stopped rattling. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it, but the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was worse. It was oppressive, heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something. I didn't wait to find out what that something was. I bolted for the door. It was a gamble, a chance I knew I couldn't afford to take, but it was my only option. I threw the door open, stumbling into the darkness of the woods. The chill of the night air cut through me, but I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. Not once. I ran until my legs gave out, until the distant town lights were just a blur on the horizon. Only then did I slow down, gasping for air, my throat raw from the cold and the fear. I didn't tell anyone what happened. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. But sometimes when the night is too quiet and the air is still, I hear it. Footsteps, shuffling, just out of sight. Always behind me, always too close. And I can't help but wonder, what if they're still out there waiting for me to come back? Waiting for me to make the same mistake again. The moment I turned off the main road and onto the dirt path that led deeper into the mountains, a chill crawled up my spine. I'd made this drive before, countless times, but something felt different today. Like the land itself was watching me, waiting. My dog Gus sat beside me in the passenger seat, usually a constant chatter of growls, barks, and low whines, but today he was silent. I glanced over at him, expecting to see the familiar gleam in his eyes, but he was staring straight ahead, his fur bristling, his body taut with an unease I couldn't explain. We'd been coming up to this remote cabin for years now, a family place I inherited after my uncle passed. It sat nestled in the shadow of the Appalachian range, forgotten by most and swallowed whole by the thick trees and rolling mist that seemed to claim this part of the world. There were no neighbors for miles, just endless stretches of forest, rough and untamed. Some called it beautiful, others called it cursed. I didn't care much either way. but there was always an edge to the air here, a kind of weight pressing down on me, never quite letting me forget the land's history. I shook off the feeling, focusing on the winding trail ahead, the tires crunching over gravel and loose rocks. Gus had been acting off since we'd left the city, and his silence unsettled me more than it should have. The woods around me were still, eerily so, like the trees were holding their breath. "Gus," I said softly, my voice unsteady, as if breaking the silence would make it worse. "What's wrong, buddy?" But he didn't answer. He just stared ahead, his eyes unblinking, his body stiff. The truck crested a small hill, and the cabin came into view, perched on the edge of a clearing, surrounded by thick woods. It looked the same as always, old and weathered, the paint peeling and fading in the relentless Appalachian weather, the porch sagging with age. But today the place felt different. The trees seemed to grow closer, the shadows longer. There was a heaviness in the air, like something had shifted while I wasn't looking. I parked the truck and turned off the engine. The sudden silence pressing in on me, Gus leapt out without waiting for me, his nails scraping across the gravel as he darted to the front door. But as I reached to grab my bag, I froze. From deep in the woods came the faintest sound, a low growl, deep and rumbling, like something large and animalistic was lurking just out of sight. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Gus had stopped moving too. His ears perked, his body rigid. The growl came again, louder this time, echoing through the trees, and my heart skipped a beat. It was no animal I recognized. "Gus?" My voice barely whispered the name, and the dog didn't respond. His eyes were wide, his tail tucked low, his body trembling. I stood frozen in place for a long moment, the growl still ringing in my ears. The sound was moving closer now, circling the cabin, almost as if it knew I was here. My feet felt like stone, rooted to the ground, unable to move. The woods felt alive, thrumming with an energy I couldn't comprehend. And that growl, it was no wild creature. It wasn't even the sound of a bear or a wolf. No, it was too deep, too resonant. Something older, primal. And then, the silence fell again, a suffocating weight that pressed against my chest. Gus turned and bolted toward the cabin door, barking once, sharp, desperate. But as quickly as the bark had come, it stopped. Dead silence. I moved to follow, but as my foot hit the first step of the porch, I heard it again, a growl. This time it was right behind me. I whipped around, heart pounding, my hand instinctively going for the knife I always kept on my belt when I came up here. The woods were still, eerily so. Not even a breeze moving the trees, but the growl was unmistakable. I couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything, but I knew something was there, something watching me, waiting. I forced myself up the stairs, the air around me thick with tension. Gus was inside now, barking frantically, the sound echoing off the walls of the cabin. I fumbled with the door, my hands shaking, and finally shoved it open. The air inside was stale, musty from disuse, but the weight of the silence inside was worse. Gus was standing in the middle of the living room, his hackles raised, eyes wide, but there was no growl, no sign of what had been outside. I shut the door behind me, bolting it quickly. The quiet inside felt suffocating, too much like the woods had followed me in. Gus was pacing in circles now, growling low in his throat, but his eyes were glued to the corner of the room, something I couldn't see, something in the shadows. "Gus, stop," I murmured, trying to calm him, but the words felt hollow in the tense silence. My dog, usually so protective, now seemed like the most fragile thing in the world. The growl came again, but this time it wasn't outside, it was inside the cabin. My heart slammed into my ribcage. I spun around, but there was nothing, just the walls, the empty air. Gus let out a short yelp and scrambled to the door, pawing at it frantically, whining with a desperation that sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my rifle from the corner and stepped toward the door, my hands slick with sweat. I could hear the growl again, closer this time, almost like it was just outside the door, but there was nothing. The woods were silent. The cabin was still. I was losing my mind. I had to be. But Gus was acting like he was about to lose his own. I opened the door slowly. My breath shallow. There was nothing. Just the still, oppressive night air, thick with fog. I stepped out onto the porch, scanning the tree line, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. The growl came again, but it was faint, as if coming from deep within the woods. "Gus!" I shouted, turning back toward the cabin, but my dog wasn't there. I rushed inside, panic bubbling in my throat, but there was no sign of Gus. The place was silent. Too silent. It didn't feel like the same cabin anymore, like the weight of something ancient had settled over it, like the land was reclaiming it. The growl rumbled again. This time it was directly behind me. I spun around, rifle raised, but the cabin was empty, except for the shadows in the corner, where I swore I saw something moving. Gus was gone, and I wasn't set alone. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the low, guttural growl coming from right beside my ear, the scent of something foul in the air, and then nothing. When I woke, the cabin was still. I don't know how much time had passed. I don't know what happened to Gus. The only thing I know for sure is that something was there, something older than the trees, something that had been waiting for me. I don't know if I shall ever leave these mountains. I don't know if I should even try, but the worst part, the part that haunts me, was what I found when I went to the back of the cabin later. The deep, clawed marks on the door, and the footprints. Human, but not quite. And the growl, it's still here. The air tasted like copper. It was thick, sticky, and cold, like the breath of something old, something that had been waiting a long time. The trees around me stood in their silent, endless rows, their bark slick with moisture. The forest was more than quiet. It was watching. My heart thudded in my chest, a slow and heavy beat that rattled in my bones. I'd come out here to find something. What? Exactly, I couldn't say. Maybe peace? Maybe escape? Maybe just the remnants of something that had once felt like me? But now, I was here alone, plunging deeper into the Appalachian woods, where the silence presses down on you like a thick blanket, and every step you take feels like it could be your last. It started a few days ago when I found the first photo. At first, it was nothing more than an oddity, old and creased, buried beneath the leaves like it had been placed there on purpose. A simple black and white image of a woman standing in front of a cabin that looked like it had been swallowed by the earth. Her face was haunting, but not in the way you'd think. She didn't look scared or sad, just empty. The edges of her features were blurred, like the camera had caught her in the midst of turning away. I shouldn't have kept it. But something about it gnawed at me, the same sense of unease that had come over me the moment I stepped foot into these woods, as though someone was waiting. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't want to seem crazy, but that photo, something about it stayed with me. And now, here I was, walking further than I'd ever dared before. The trail was barely a suggestion, just a faint scar in the earth, barely visible beneath the thick undergrowth. I wasn't sure what drew me here, but I knew I was close. There was a pull, something beyond curiosity. Every footstep felt like it was leading me to something I was supposed to see. The trees parted suddenly, and I found myself at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood a cabin, its walls sagging like an old man's bones, windows dark with dust and grime. The air around it smelled stale, like it had been forgotten for decades. My stomach turned. It was the same cabin as in the photo, no doubt about it. The same crooked porch, the same faded wood. The woman from the picture had been standing right there. My skin prickled. I was a fool for even considering it. But something inside me pushed me toward the door. The cabin had no door now. Just an open frame that led to nothing but darkness. A darkness that seemed to breathe. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet. The sound loud in the suffocating silence. My flashlight swept across the room, revealing nothing but dust and webs. It looked like a place abandoned long ago, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. A lingering sense that it hadn't just been abandoned. Something had left it. Something that hadn't been human. And that was when I saw it. A stack of photographs, yellowed and curled with age, sat on a dusty wooden table in the corner. They looked like they had been placed there recently, as though something had been waiting for me. I reached for them with shaking hands, the unease in my chest growing with every passing second. I flipped through the photos one by one. Faces stared back at me, their expressions frozen in time. Each photo was of the same place. The cabin, the forest surrounding it, but the people in the photos, they weren't strangers. I recognized them. They were pictures of me. The first one was me, standing at the edge of the clearing, just as I had walked in. The second was a photo of me, standing at the cabin's door, my face twisted in some strange expression of both curiosity and dread. There were more, each one capturing me in different moments, different angles, until I came to the last one. I nearly dropped the stack. The last photo was of me, taken from the cabin's dark corner, my back turned, staring out into the woods. I hadn't been near the cabin when I'd arrived. I hadn't even known it existed until I stepped into the clearing. I stumbled backward, my breath coming fast and shallow. The forest outside seemed to close in on me, the trees pressing together like a wall, suffocating, trapping me in their silent gaze. The photo wasn't just a record of what I'd done. It was a warning. And then I heard it. The sound I had been dreading since I entered these woods. A low rustle, almost imperceptible, like something brushing against the leaves. But I knew it wasn't the wind. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't alone. Someone or something was out there watching me. My heartbeat quickened. I backed away from the table, my mind racing. I had to leave, had to get out of here. But the more I tried to focus on my escape, the more I felt the weight of the forest pressing in on me. The ground beneath my feet seemed to tilt, and the world around me wavered. I blinked hard, but the dizziness didn't fade. Then I heard it again. A whisper. It wasn't words. It was just breathing, slow and deliberate, like someone was standing just behind me, waiting. I turned to run, but the door, what had been an open frame, was now blocked. The cabin had changed, warped around me. There was no escape, no way out. My mind raced for any logical explanation, but there was none. This wasn't some strange glitch in reality. This was the woods. This was the place, and the place had claimed me. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. But eventually, the pressure on my chest loosened, the silence shifted. I looked up, and there, standing in the doorway, was the woman from the photo. Her features were clearer now, more defined, but still, her face was drawn, pale as death, her eyes empty and lost. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me. A crackling sound broke the stillness. I looked down at my feet, and there, buried in the dust, was another photograph. I picked it up, my hands trembling. This time it was a picture of me, lying on the ground just outside the cabin, my face a blur, my eyes wide with terror. I dropped the photo, my legs giving way. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. I was going to die here, in this God-forsaken place, just like the others. But then, something changed. The woman stepped back into the shadows, her form dissolving into the dark corners of the cabin. A door I hadn't noticed before opened, revealing the deep blackness of the forest beyond. I didn't hesitate. I ran through the woods, through the thick underbrush and tangled roots, my heart pounding, my breath coming in desperate gasps. The air felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of what had happened, what I had seen. I made it back to the edge of the forest, to the dirt road where my car sat waiting. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. The cabin, the photos, the woman, they were all behind me now. But they stepped, never truly let me go. As I drove away, I could feel the eyes on me. In the rearview mirror, I thought I saw something. A shadow, a flicker. I tried to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But deep down I knew I wasn't the first to find the cabin. And I wouldn't be the last. And the woods, they would always be waiting. I don't know how long I've been walking. Hours, maybe. The kind of time that stretches until your bones ache. But the mind can't quite grasp. The sun's low, casting long shadows that crawl across the uneven trail, and my breath comes harder now, lungs heavy with the crisp mountain air. I shouldn't have come this far. I know that, but something pulled me here. Something I can't explain. It's been too quiet, too still, since I left the car behind at the old fire road, a place so forgotten by most folks that it barely shows up on maps anymore. I thought about it for a long time. Too long, truth be told. A wrong turn, a lingering curiosity. Whatever you want to call it, I found my way down into these woods, deeper than I ever should have. Something's wrong. I feel it in my chest, like a weight pressing down on my ribs. Not fear exactly, but something older, a kind of warning, the kind my grandmother used to give me when she talked about the things that lived in these mountains, the things that never left. I didn't listen back then, thought she was just rambling, like old folks do. But the silence now, it's unnatural, like the air itself is holding its breath. Then I heard it, a woman's scream, high-pitched, desperate, cutting through the stillness of the trees like a knife. It wasn't like any scream I'd heard before. It wasn't human, not quite, too loud, too sharp, and yet there was a strange rhythm to it, like the scream was waiting for something. I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears, and every hair on my neck stood at attention. I knew I should turn back. The smart part of me screamed to run, but then, just as quickly, the instinct to help kicked in, irrational as it was. I followed the sound, each step taking me deeper into the thicket. The trees here are twisted, ancient, their bark gnarled and dark like old bones. The ground is soft beneath my feet, mud clinging to my boots with every step. I can feel my heart racing now, thudding against my ribs like it wants to break free. The air's colder here too, colder than it should be for late spring, like the mountain is breathing frost in the middle of warmth. The scream came again, this time closer. My breath caught, and my mouth went dry. I shouldn't be here, but I pushed forward, driven by some primitive need to know. I wasn't ready for what I found. She was kneeling on the ground, her face buried in her hands, her body shaking violently. The woman was dressed in a tattered white dress, long and flowing like something from another time, dirt smudged across her skin. She didn't look up as I approached, didn't even acknowledge my presence, just rocked back and forth, her sobs muffled by her hands. "Hey," I called, voice trembling despite my best effort. "Are you okay?" No answer. I stepped closer. She didn't move. "Ma'am?" I reached out, my fingers brushing the back of her shoulder. The moment my skin touched her, she flinched like I'd set her on fire, jerking away from me with unnatural speed. Her head snapped up, and I took a step back. Her eyes were wide and wild, bloodshot, the whites nearly swallowed by the dark of her pupils. There was no recognition there, only something feral, something lost. She wasn't the woman I thought she was. Her face, pale and gaunt, looked wrong, twisted. Her hair hung in matted tangles, and the way she stared at me made my blood freeze in my veins. "This happened, sorry," I stammered, my voice now thick with unease. "I didn't Sapin mean to." She didn't speak. Instead, she slowly tilted her head, like she was trying to understand me, or perhaps trying to make sense of my very presence. And then, just as slowly, her lips parted. But the sound that came out wasn't a word. It was a low, guttural growl. Like an animal's warning, the hair on my neck stood straight up. I backed away, my breath coming faster now, chest tight. "I need to go," I muttered. But my feet felt rooted to the spot, my body unwilling to obey the command to flee. Her hand shot out, long fingers grasping at the air like claws. I barely dodged in time. But when I looked back, she was still there, crouched low, her body twisted in ways that seemed unnatural. She watched me with that same hollow stare. "What do you want?" I managed, my throat dry. She didn't answer. Instead, she lowered her hand and, with a sudden jerk, pointed to something off in the distance, deep into the trees. My heart skipped a beat as I followed her finger, but the more I looked, the less I could see. It was like the trees themselves blurred the vision, the path ahead growing more and more indistinct. I turned back to her, my pulse racing. "What steps back there?" I whispered. She just stared, unblinking, as though she could see something I couldn't, something buried beneath the layers of earth and time. Another scream tore through the silence. This time there was no mistaking it. The sound was human. It was close, closer than I realized. I spun around, my body frozen with the weight of the realization, but when I turned back to the woman, she was gone. I don't know how she disappeared so fast, or why I couldn't hear her move. One moment she was there, the next, nothing. Only the silence remained. But the scream, it didn't stop. It wasn't her. It was coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. I shouldn't have gone after it. My legs screamed at me to turn back, to head toward the car and never look back. But I couldn't stop. It felt like I was being dragged, like something in the woods had a hold of me, pulling me closer to it. And so I walked. The woods were darker now, the shadows longer, heavier. The ground beneath my feet felt spongy, unstable. Every step I took felt wrong, like the earth itself was shifting beneath me. I don't know how much time passed, but I reached a small clearing, one I didn't remember seeing earlier. In the center of the clearing was a small cabin, barely standing, the wood weathered and sagging. It looked abandoned, but the door was slightly ajar, and I could smell something sour, like rot. The scream came again. This time I could tell it was coming from inside the cabin. I should have run. I should have turned around and never looked back, but I couldn't. My feet moved on their own. I found myself at the door, my hand shaking as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and cold. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, but nothing in the cabin made sense. The furniture was overturned, the windows shattered, the walls covered in strange markings I couldn't decipher. It looked like no one had lived here in years. But there was something off about it, like someone had been here recently. And then I saw her. The woman was standing in the far corner. Her back to me, she was humming a low, drawn-out melody that seemed to seep into the very bones of the house. "Are you?" I began, but the words stuck in my throat. She turned slowly, and I saw her face again. This time her eyes weren't wild. They were wide, but not with fear. It was something else. Something I couldn't place, a kind of knowing. She opened her mouth to speak, but all that came out was a low whisper, a word that didn't sound like any language I knew. It was a sound, more than a word, a vibration that seemed to hum in the air. And then the door slammed shut behind me. I tried to scream, but my voice caught, choked by the suffocating darkness. The last thing I remember is her voice again, just above a whisper. Dawn said, "Trust the mountain. It remembers." And then, nothing. I woke up outside, my body sore, the taste of dirt in my mouth, and the woods silent again, as if nothing had ever happened. I don't know how I made it out. I don't know if what happened was real, but I do know one thing for sure. The woman wasn't who she claimed to be. I haven't told anyone about what happened. I don't think I ever will, but every night, when I close my eyes, I hear that humming, and I feel like something's watching me from just outside my window. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed, and every time I see the trees moving in the wind, I wonder, what was she trying to warn me about? I never thought much about the old stories my grandmother told me. The ones about the Appalachian woods, with their shadows that stretch longer than the daylight hours, and the whispers that seep through the trees when the wind's right. I always thought she was just trying to scare me, like grandmothers do, to keep me from wandering too far off the beaten path. But now, standing here in the fading light, I can't help but wonder how much of it was real. I'd gone out on my own that day, figuring a solo hike would clear my head. The Appalachian Trail runs through this part of the mountains, a place I've hiked many times before, though never this deep. But there's something different today. The air's heavier than usual, like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. It's too quiet. No birds, no critters rustling in the underbrush. Even the wind stopped blowing. And that's strange for this time of year. The kind of silence that makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The kind where you know something's off, even if you can't put your finger on it. I push forward, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling down my spine. My boots crunch on the dry leaves, and the sound feels too loud, too intrusive in the oppressive quiet. I've been walking for hours, and the trail's getting narrower. There's no one else around, just me in the woods. I should have turned back long before now, but I didn't. Maybe it was the isolation, the way the mountain seemed to close in on me. I wanted to see how far I could go, maybe prove something to myself. Maybe it was just the silence calling me deeper, begging me to step further away from the world. Then I hear it. A footstep, barely a sound, but it's there. Soft, like someone or something is following me. I freeze, my heart hammering in my chest. My breath catches in my throat. I turn around quickly, expecting to see a hiker or maybe a lost camper, but there's nothing, just the endless, empty woods. I shake my head, trying to laugh it off. Just nerves. I've been hiking for too long, and the silence getting to me. But then I hear it again. Another footstep, closer this time, slow, deliberate. I can't see anyone, but I know someone's there, and they're not too far behind. Panic starts to rise in my throat. I turn around again, my pulse pounding in my ears. The path is empty, but I feel something, someone watching me. The trees, thick with their twisted branches, seem to close in, blocking out the last of the dying light. A cold shiver creeps up my spine. I tell myself it's just a trick of the mind, that it's just the forest playing its usual games with me. But something's different. The stillness feels too heavy, like it's pressing against me from all sides. I start walking faster, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I glance over my shoulder once more, my eyes scanning the trees. There's no one there, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed. It's like something's just out of sight, lurking behind the trees, always just beyond my vision. Then I hear it again, a voice. But not really a voice, more like a whisper, carried on the wind, so soft it's almost imperceptible. I can't make out the words, but the tone, it's familiar. It sounds like my name. I stop dead in my tracks. My stomach lurches. I'm not imagining this. I didn't hear what I thought I heard. This is real. I try to calm myself. There's a logical explanation for all of this. Maybe it's just some other hiker on the trail. Maybe it's a figment of my exhaustion, my nerves finally breaking under the weight of too much solitude. But deep down I know I'm not alone out here. There's something in the woods with me, And it's not just the forest playing tricks. I take a step back, my eyes scanning the shadows. The sun's almost gone now, leaving only a dull, fading light. The trail's nearly invisible, swallowed up by the growing darkness. I don't know what's worse, the growing shadows or the creeping dread that's crawling through my veins. Suddenly, a noise. A twig snaps. It's sharp and loud in the quiet, like a gunshot. My head whips around, but I see nothing. The wind picks up again, rustling the leaves, but it does nothing to calm the storm rising in my chest. I start moving faster, the urgency creeping into my steps. I don't know where I'm going, just away from here. I can't shake the feeling that something's closing in on me, that whatever is out there is getting closer, just behind me. I break into a run, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. But the deeper I go, the more I realize I've lost the trail. I slow to a stop, panic blooming in my chest. My mind's racing. I've been here before. I know I've passed this same rock, that fallen tree, but everything's changed now. The woods have shifted. The path is gone. I turn around again, looking for any sign of where I've been, but all I see are trees. Trees that feel like they've always been here, like they've been watching me from the beginning. I don't know what to do. I'm lost. I hear the whisper again, clearer this time. It's my name. It's not the wind. Someone's calling me. But I don't know who. I don't want to know. Then, just as quickly as the fear hits, it's replaced by something else. A cold, creeping realization. I'm not alone out here. Not anymore. I force my legs to move again, but my steps are slow now, deliberate. I know I can't outrun whatever this is. The woods are too thick, too tangled. The shadows are too deep. I start to call out, my voice trembling. Hello? Is someone out there? But the only answer is the wind. Then I hear it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. Slow, methodical. They stop when I stop, but I can't bring myself to turn around. I don't want to see what's there, what's following me. My heart slams in my chest, and my breath comes in gasps. I don't know how long I've been walking, how long I've been running, but the woods seem to stretch on forever. The trees are closing in, their branches reaching out like fingers clawing at the sky. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, I see it. A cabin. It's old, the wood dark and rotting, its windows like empty eyes staring into the woods. I don't care how strange it looks, how out of place it is. It's a refuge. I run to it, my hands shaking as I push open the creaky door. Inside, it's dark, but I don't care. I slam the door behind me, leaning against it, my heart racing. For a moment, all is silent. The footsteps are gone, the whispers stopped, but I know I'm not alone. I can feel the presence in the room, like something's watching me from the corner of the cabin. I turn, my eyes scanning the darkness, but there's nothing there, just shadows. But something's different now. The air's colder and the silence is oppressive. My skin feels like it's crawling. I can't explain it, but I know I'm not safe here. Not anymore. I hear a voice again, soft and clear. But it's not in my head this time. It's right behind me. Go. I spin around, but there's no one there. No one, except for the shadows. The shadows that seem to stretch just a little too far. I don't know how I made it out of the cabin. I don't remember running. I don't remember anything, except the desperate need to escape. When I reached the trail again, I didn't look back. The mountains were still there, but the feeling, the dread, the eyes that watched me from the trees was gone. But the silence still haunts me. The whisper of my name carried on the wind. I never saw the man, but his shadow followed me for days, and it still follows me now. Every time I close my eyes, I can feel it lurking just beyond the edge of my vision, just out of reach. and I don't know if I'm ever really going to be alone again. The trees felt wrong as soon as I set foot in the hollow. Their trunks were thicker, older, gnarled, twisting like they had their own memories of things best forgotten. A feeling of dread crept over me like the cold mist that rolled down the mountain, thick as a shroud. I should have known better than to come here. I'd come to meet Sam, my old friend from high school. We'd lost touch after he moved back to these mountains, and when he called me last month asking if I wanted to hike out here with him, I thought maybe it'd be good to catch up. The silence in his voice had unnerved me then, but I brushed it off. I should have known better. I called out his name, but my voice seemed to disappear into the thick forest, swallowed by the heavy silence. No birds, no animals, just the rustle of leaves in the wind and my heartbeat thudding in my ears. It was like the woods didn't want anyone here. I didn't realize how far I'd gone until the path disappeared. The rocks and brush had swallowed it whole, leaving me with no choice but to push forward, stumbling through the underbrush, my boots sinking into the wet soil. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't check it. Sam had insisted on meeting near the old ridge where they said the strange lights appeared, or so the locals whispered. That was all he had said, and I didn't ask any more questions. The narrow path twisted through the forest, overgrown with brambles and vines. The deeper I went, the thicker the trees grew, blocking out the sun until everything around me was suffused with a gloomy twilight. It wasn't just the overgrowth that made it feel oppressive, though. It was the way the forest seemed to breathe, the way it felt alive, watching me with unseen eyes. A cabin, barely visible through the trees, half hidden beneath a canopy of thick moss-covered branches. My heart skipped a beat. Sam had said there was an old hunting cabin up here, but I hadn't expected it to be in this state, neglected, crumbling, and far more isolated than I had imagined. The wood was rotting, the windows shattered, and the door hung loosely on its hinges, swaying in the wind like it was begging to be opened. I kept moving, my steps growing slower, more uncertain. The sinking feeling in my stomach was growing heavier with each step, like the mountain itself was shifting beneath me. My mind kept circling back to Sam. He'd sounded different on the phone, but I couldn't pin it down. There had been a tremor, a hesitation in his words that didn't belong. I kept telling myself that I was imagining things, that this was just the wilderness playing tricks on my mind. Then I saw it. The trees felt wrong as soon as I set foot in the hollow. Their trunks were thicker, older, gnarled, twisting like they had their own memories of things best forgotten. A feeling of dread crept over me like the cold mist that rolled down the mountain, thick as a shroud. I should have known better than to come here. The air had a heaviness to it, a thickness that made it hard to breathe. I couldn't place it, but the smell of decay lingered beneath the wet scent of moss and earth. It was as though the very ground beneath my feet was soaking up something vile, something I couldn't see but could feel pressing on my chest. I'd come to meet Sam, my old friend from high school. We'd lost touch after he moved back to these mountains, and when he called me last month asking if I wanted to hike out here with him, I thought maybe it'd be good to catch up. The silence in his voice had unnerved me then, but I brushed it off. I should have known better. The narrow path twisted through the forest, overgrown with brambles and vines. The deeper I went, the thicker the trees grew, blocking out the sun until everything around me was suffused with a gloomy twilight. It wasn't just the overgrowth that made it feel oppressive, though. It was the way the forest seemed to breathe, the way it felt alive, watching me with unseen eyes. I didn't realize how far I'd gone until the path disappeared. The rocks and brush had swallowed it whole, leaving me with no choice but to push forward, stumbling through the underbrush, my boots sinking into the wet soil. My phone was in my pocket, but I didn't check it. Sam had insisted on meeting near the old ridge where they said the strange lights appeared, or so the locals whispered. That was all he had said, and I didn't ask any more questions. I called out his name, but my voice seemed to disappear into the thick forest, swallowed by the heavy silence. No birds, no animals, just the rustle of leaves in the wind and my heartbeat thudding in my ears. It was like the woods didn't want anyone here. I kept moving, my steps growing slower, more uncertain. The sinking feeling in my stomach was growing heavier with each step, like the mountain itself was shifting beneath me. My mind kept circling back to Sam. He'd sounded different on the phone, but I couldn't pin it down. There had been a tremor, a hesitation in his words that didn't belong. I kept telling myself that I was imagining things, that this was just the wilderness playing tricks on my mind. Then I saw it. A cabin, barely visible through the trees, half hidden beneath a canopy of thick moss-covered branches. My heart skipped a beat. Sam had said there was an old hunting cabin up here, but I hadn't expected it to be in this state, neglected, crumbling, and far more isolated than I had imagined. The wood was rotting, the windows shattered, and the door hung loosely on its hinges, swaying in the wind like it was begging to be opened. I called Sam's name again, louder this time, but the only answer was the creaking of the door as it swung in the breeze. I couldn't ignore the pull to go inside. It felt wrong, but it felt like I had no choice. The moment I stepped inside, a cold gust hit me, sharp like it had been waiting. The air smelled of mildew and rusted iron, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. I paused, my breath catching in my throat. There was a strange, unfamiliar feeling here, a kind of staleness that made everything feel trapped, as though time had forgotten this place. The room was dark, the only light coming through the broken windows. Dust hung in the air, thick and oppressive. The furniture was old, beaten up, chairs with torn upholstery, a table covered in dried leaves and dirt. But it wasn't the state of the cabin that caught my attention. It was the pile of old yellowed papers scattered across the floor. I bent down to pick one up, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, scrawled hastily. The ink faded and smudged. It read, "They're watching. Don't trust the trees. Don't trust the mountain." My pulse quickened. Who had written this? Was Sam here before me? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I scanned the rest of the room, looking for any sign of him. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I noticed the shape of something in the corner of the cabin near the far wall. It was a figure, dark, standing perfectly still, its face obscured by the shadows. My breath hitched in my throat. "Sam," I whispered, though a part of me already knew it wasn't him. The figure didn't move. I could feel my legs locking up, my mind screaming at me to run, but I couldn't. It was then that the phone rang. The sound sliced through the tension like a knife, sharp and sudden. I pulled the phone from my pocket with shaky hands, my heart pounding in my chest. The caller ID read Sam. My breath faltered as I answered it. "Sam?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. There was a long pause on the other end. Then a voice I barely recognized. "You shouldn't have come here," Sam Sepp's voice said, thick and distorted, as though something was wrong with him. His words slurred and uneven. "They Sepps are watching. They Sepps are listening. You Sepps are not alone." I took a step back, the phone trembling in my hand. I glanced at the dark figure in the corner again, but it was gone. The silence in the cabin felt suffocating. I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my chest and the ragged sound of my breath. "Where are you, Sam?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Don't." He trailed off, his voice barely a whisper now. "Don't trust the mountain. Don't trust the forest." The call abruptly cut off, and all that remained was a strange, static-filled hum. I stared at the phone, my mind racing. What had just happened? I could hear nothing but the faint rustling of wind outside. No footsteps, no movement, only the unnerving silence. I didn't know what to do. The air felt thick with something I couldn't place, an impending sense of doom settling into my bones. I wasn't sure if I should wait for Sam to show up or leave the cabin, but I knew one thing for certain: the mountain didn't want me here. I turned to leave, my steps unsteady, But then I stopped. The door was no longer swinging. It was shut. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up again. I turned, my heart racing, expecting to see that figure again in the corner. But there was nothing. That was when I heard it. A soft, shuffling sound from behind me. Slow, deliberate, like someone was dragging their feet across the floor. My pulse skyrocketed as I spun around, but the room was empty, except for the trail of muddy footprints that led from the corner of the cabin to the door. The door, which was still shut. I was trapped. I had no choice but to step forward, out into the forest. It was the only way. But the unease in my chest felt like it had rooted there, growing heavier with every step I took. The ground seemed to shift under my feet. The air colder now, the fog thicker. I had no idea which way I had come from, and the trees felt like they were pressing in too close. I heard something in the distance then, a voice, faint but unmistakable. "You should instead have come back." The voice was Sam's. It was coming from somewhere in the woods, but it was wrong. Too distant, too distorted. My hands shook as I fumbled with my phone, desperately trying to call him back, but the signal had gone out. All I could do was stand there in the growing darkness, the mountain pressing down on me, and wait for the next step, the next sound, the next thing I could never escape. And then, just as quickly as it had started, everything went silent again. I never found out what happened to Sam.